All right, we're making history here. I've been doing podcasts for 13 years. Have never had a Deadman on the podcast, but now here he is, the Undertaker. How are you?
I'm doing good, and if you live to tell about it, you'll be doing even better, I guess. Right?
Have you ever done a podcast before?
You know what? Just since this doc has come out, but never. I've always passed. I just, the character always come first in my book. So there's a lot of things that I had to say no to, just because I didn't feel like it worked, for what I was trying to do on TV. And, for all those years, it just, you can't see this part of me and then me go out and then do the other guy.
Right.
There'd be a connection. So, I've probably done more media and more things in the last 2 weeks than I have well, I wouldn't say my whole career, but it's probably close. Yeah.
Well, you have The Last Ride, which there's 2 episodes up right now on the WWE network. And I had no idea this was happening. I had no idea it was going to be this honest and this behind the scenes. Cause as you just said, you've been meticulous about never showing that side. What made you decide? Cause this goes back basically to 2017.
Right.
What made you decide you wanted to start documenting this and kind of cross that fourth wall?
Well, it started out with at that WrestleMania in 17. I thought that was it, and because I had been so protective, I just thought, I didn't know. We didn't start out with the idea of making a documentary. I just wanted that footage of those last few days around what I thought was going to be my last WrestleMania.
Right.
I didn't know what we were going to do with it, but I wanted it. And I knew at some point it would probably come in and we would do something. I had no idea it would be at this scale that it's turned out to be, because obviously, after that WrestleMania, then it kind of continued on. And the next thing you know, we're 3 years down the road and we've got all this footage, and yeah, that's kind of how it came about. It wasn't designed to be a docuseries. It was kind of just, I wanted to document those last few days of me being around the business. And it really blew up into a 3-year project.
Yeah, but you should have known, as a wrestling guy, wrestling and boxing, nobody ever officially retires. You think you're retiring, but you just never know. People come back all the time.
That's what, in the doc, it's just like the old Godfather quote, every time I think I'm out, I get pulled right back in. So no, you never say never. You never say never in this business. And, that is a parallel between boxing and wrestling, is like, you just never know.
Well, I don't want to spoil part 1 too much, because part 1, I was not only riveted, like I was really into it. I thought it was excellent. Like, as somebody who really cares about the form, and, a lot of the times when people do these, they become basically infomercials. I call them documercials. And this was way deeper than that, way more honest. That one of the things I didn't realize was how disappointed you were with that WrestleMania match in 2017. And you're going against Roman Reigns. It's this big moment for him, know, and the company had been building him. And this was, supposed to be the exclamation point for, here he is, he's arrived, he is our new guy. And you felt like you let him down, which I never knew any of that story. Why did you feel like you let him down? Well,
my hip was so bad going into that match. I couldn't perform at a level that I wanted to perform at. And then with the magnitude of trying to, I'm going to put Roman over, and, that was going to be a big launching pad for him. So obviously I wanted to perform, I wanted that to be like, okay, this is the slingshot. And I just didn't have it,
Did you know as it was going on?
Oh, I knew it. Yeah. I knew it before it started. I knew it. I was going to be in trouble at the Royal Rumble in January before that. If you go back and look at the footage, I mean, you can tell, like, I'm just not in the shape that I should be in. I couldn't train the way I wanted to train, but I'd already committed to doing it. And so I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And, passing the torch is a really big thing in our industry. And he's a really good dude. He deserved it. And I just wanted to be able to give the best to him that I could, knowing what that match was going to mean to his career. And then, when I couldn't deliver for him, that kind of stuff bothers me.
And when you're leaving the ring after that, and in that match, famously, you left your stuff in the middle of the ring and you walked off. You held the fist up, but then you go backstage and you have all these different people greeting you, applauding, hugging you, saying good match. Are you reading their reactions to see how genuine it is and be like, oh man, I know this didn't go well. I can tell from the looks in their eyes.
Yeah, I don't think it was so much as it was a good match, as I think everyone kind of knew that was the end.
Yeah.
And I think it was kind of over the body of work and the appreciation. It definitely wasn't for that match. I mean,
right.
That match fell, anybody wants to be honest. I mean, it fell way short of the expectations, but I think it was more so a respect thing for all the 27 years prior and everything, more so, and then no one, when it was grown men, tough guy men that were, had tears in their eyes, when I put the hat and the coat and everything down, no one expected that. No one knew what was going to, no one knew what was happening. So it was so organic. And, I think it kind of really caught a lot of people off guard. And sorry about that. Hang on one second. Anyway, so yeah, I think the applause and the greetings and everything were more so for the body of
ceremonial.
Work
yeah,
in the match. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because in part 2, you show the 2018 match against Cena, and you had hip surgery at that point, but you're also in way better shape, and you can see it in the match. Like, it looks like you're 25 pounds lighter, obviously because you were able to work out, but you're moving around so much better. And at that point, you go in part 1, you talk about, basically you're wrestling once a year.
Right.
And you have to spend 3-4 months getting ready for this one match. And then 3-4 months after, just recovering from the match. When you talk about like getting ready for the match, how do you get your body ready when your body just hasn't been taking those bumps and those hits and all that stuff just to take it for 25 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and then it was a lot easier. Obviously, you see in part 2 that I actually, had a ring come down here to Texas, which I would go to Orlando a little bit. But I have to be judicious in how much trauma I take, just because it set me back. It would set me back in my training.
Yeah.
As crazy as all that sounds. And then what happens, like when you can't take bumps and you can't put your body through that, then it's really tough on the backside of that match. Now you can get through the match, but man, I tell you what, my body would like literally shut down after a WrestleMania match, just from the trauma. That's the best thing about being able to work, all the time, is that your body stays conditioned and for the trauma that it has to take. And then especially being WrestleMania, where everything's let go. I mean, that's our biggest deal. So everybody, they don't put any stops on anything. They just go. And, everybody wants to have that, those big time moments. And so the body not being conditioned for that is, it's pretty brutal. That's why I was so disappointed, because I had all that time in the ring. I was in the ring sparring and going over stuff every other day. And then, I get to New Orleans and they said, this match probably needs to go about 5 minutes. And I'm like, you're
Right.
kidding me, right? Because I'm ready to go. I was ready to go for 45 minutes. That's
Right.
how I trained, and a 45-minute pace, because I was so dead set. Like, I was so disappointed from the prior year that, like, I'm gonna tear this up, and I am gonna go at a pace probably faster than what people normally see me go at. I'm gonna do things that I haven't done in a long time, and I was so prepared, and then it was 5 minutes, and I say it in the there. We sell entertainment. We don't sell time, and that was more of a kind of a selfish thing for me. Like, I wanted to show, like, what you saw last year is not where I'm at. And
right.
And so.
Well, it seems like, football players talk about it the same way, where they need to almost condition their bodies to the punishment. And if they don't have that 6 to 8 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is of the preseason, just to hit the shit out of each other.
Right.
Then when you get into a game, it's almost like your body can't handle it. It's weird to think of the concept of conditioning your body for punishment, but I think wrestling and football are probably the two best examples of it, right?
I think so. And then, even, that's why you spar too, when for boxers spar,
True.
It's also to toughen up the skin on their face so they don't get cut. And,
right.
So you have to, you just can't, and especially as you get older, you have to figure that in too. So I have to train 10 times as hard now for half the results. And, I kind of think that's what happened in the match with Lesnar at Mania, when I got concussed so severely. That year, I just couldn't. I was like, I had to figure out, okay, am I going to be cardiovascular conditioned, or am I going to be conditioned for trauma? I had to pick one or the other, because I was just so beat up that I couldn't get in there and take a lot of bumps. And I was like, well, it's one night. I'll be able to endure whatever. And I think it kind of caught up with me that year.
Right.
Because most guys aren't able to throw me around, like Brock could. He gave me all those German suplexes and, bumps that most people can't give me. So, there was nothing that he did that was unsafe. I don't think my body was conditioned for the trauma. And
he also seems like the least fun person to get into the ring with, I would guess.
You know what? I actually enjoyed, through my, his first time there, and when he came back, it's there, man. I mean,
that's what I mean. Like, so physically, so ridiculous. The burden of even just the German suplex is like, yeah. I can't even imagine. Like, he's doing like 5, 6 in a row. You got to be like, feel like a rag doll.
Yeah. By the time you get the cobwebs shook out of your head, then there you go. Like, okay, it's going to be one of those nights.
Yeah.
But, that's the game. It's not ballet. And some nights, you're the one that's giving them, and some night you're the one getting it. So it all works out. And,
I didn't realize until I watched this show that you have no recollection of that match, because I would say that's the most famous match of this decade. It's certainly one of the most surreal wrestling matches ever, where, you have this, I think you're 20-0 at that point, and it was just assumed you're never losing.
Right.
And the sound in the arena when it actually happened, I don't think that's ever been replicated in wrestling.
Yeah, I know it was from watching it back. I mean, it was like, all the air got taken out of the arena.
I think when Bruno Sammartino finally lost in the mid 70s, when he'd had the title for like 8 years, right, everyone says that it was the same kind of sound then, where people were just like, they just couldn't believe it. And then they got pissed.
Yeah.
But it was like 10 seconds of like just complete disbelief. But was that, I'd heard 2 different versions of this. Were you supposed to lose that match?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know if they got audibled because you were so compromised at some point, if they had to like shift it.
No one knew. I mean, I guess, well, they knew, but they like, Brock, I think he got hyped nervous about it. You could tell. I mean, maybe for the casual fan, you couldn't tell, but I mean, if anybody that is in on our business or follows our business pretty intently, you can tell that I'm really lethargic and I'm moving kind of slow.
I thought you got concussed watching it because you didn't seem right. And
yeah,
every single moment even when you're trying to get up, it just was so delayed. And it was like, this doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like something's wrong.
Yeah. And it was. And like I said, to answer you, my memory of that day stops at about 3:30 in the afternoon. That's my last memory I have of that day. And my wife had come backstage, as she normally does before, I really started getting ready to, start going through my process. And, I told her, what was going to happen and calmed her down.
Yeah.
and that was it. And then, like I said, my process of getting ready for a match is, there's the stretching and the heat and seeing the doctors and everything else that I have to do, which I did all of it, but I don't remember doing any of it. And I had no recollection of the match. It was 4:00 in the morning before I knew what my name was.
How long after that match did you feel okay? How long did it take?
It took, I got out of the hospital, went back to the hotel for a few hours, and then I got on my bus and we came back to Texas, and I basically stayed in my room in the dark for nearly 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and I've been concussed before, but never to that level. I'd never had like the lingering headache and the sensitivity to light, all that had never happened to that extreme before. So it was, it was strange. And then not being able to remember, I've been concussed, like I said, a few times, and, been able to finish the match and then know exactly when it happened. But not that time. Yeah.
And you watch the match, you don't even know when it happened, right?
I can't. I've watched that match as closely, and picked it apart. I just can't tell, because there's nothing that really said, like, oh, okay. Cause sometimes you can tell by the way your head hits something or, you'll say, okay, there it is. But I've watched it back and I just cannot pinpoint where it happened.
Well, the irony is,
I guess I can kind of get in the area because I can tell by the way, my body language and my pacing and everything kind of stops. But there's nothing that says, okay, that should have caused a concussion.
The irony is, it's one of the most famous passing the torch matches because that was Lesnar is one of the most important guys of the past decade. That was the match that cemented it, and it's not different than. Hulk was the biggest star in the world when he wrestled Andre, but to pin Andre was such a big deal. It put him at a whole other level because nobody beat Andre.
Right.
And it was the same thing with you. And I really feel like I think those are probably the only two matches like that. Can you think of another match like that where it was that much significance?
Not really. And I remember, I remember Hogan beating Andre, and just like I was, you kind of from where the industry was at the time, you still think that's Andre,
Yeah.
But Hulk was getting that super mega push and was the face of wrestling, but you still, for guys that had followed Andre, he's like, still Andre the Giant. Who, how are they going to do this? And when it happened, you're like, wow, okay. It's great. And it was the same thing, with Brock. People were just like, a lot of people were upset about it, and a lot of people felt like he didn't need it. It could have done, it could have been somebody else, business is business.
You didn't even realize the streak was a thing with WrestleMania until what, like 8, 9, 10?
I think I was I think it was with going into 10 or so. I think it was Flair in Toronto. Because at the end of that, I hold up the fingers and, I count them out. But before, somebody, I think it was that year that someone said, you're undefeated, right? I was like, really? I had no clue. I mean, we were so just in the groove and 300 days a year. And you don't even think about, at that time, you don't think about your win-loss record and all that.
Right.
And then it took on a life of its own. Like, okay, well, we got, that's just unheard of to be, 10-0 at WrestleMania. And then I think it went to 21 before Brock beat me.
That's right. 21. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I remember when it hit double figures, just wondering, just as a wrestling fan, just being like, I wonder if they'll just how long they'll keep this going, because part of the problem with wrestling is, when it gets into trouble, it's when they just kind of don't stick with something.
Yeah.
And they get hasty, or they're like, oh shit, we need something to happen. And then all of a sudden they've put 8-9 months into a storyline, or 8-9 years. And then they'll just get rid of it in a weekend. And They never did that with the WrestleMania streak, which I always thought was impressive.
Well, there were some, I guess there were some creative meetings that it came up about various different people beating the streak. And I think it was one of those rare occasions where a lot of people kind of just like, Vince, you can't do that. It's just not, we have something here, because, there was whoever the main event was, and then there was whoever Taker was going to wrestle it, who was going to try and get the streak that year.
Right. So, it's like double main event.
It was a double main event. And, fortunately, a lot of guys, like, if they didn't win, if they didn't win the chamber, which the chamber match automatically guarantees you a title shot. The consolation prize was not that bad, because you have to go against, get Taker and try and go after the streak. So,
what was the best one in your opinion? What was the peak? What was the peak WrestleMania match? I have my own personal pick, but I'm interested to see if it jibes with yours.
It would have, man. I tell you what, I talk about this, like, there's the four matches, the 2 matches I had with Shawn, followed by the 2 with Triple H. Because that was just like, if you look at it, it's one continual story.
Yeah.
Me and Shawn, we had kind of our heaven and hell match, which I've never been one to say, okay, this was a great match. That match was as damn near as good as it gets, and I'll put it up against about anything. I mean, it was just everything clicked, and the match was just phenomenal. I had such good chemistry with Shawn, and then came back the following year because he was ready to retire. So then you have that match, which was that was a ton of pressure, because you got Shawn Michaels' last match. There's a little bit of pressure in that, especially being at WrestleMania.
Right.
So those 2 matches were really good. And then we got to follow that up with, okay, well, Shawn Michaels' best friend's going to step in, and, he's going to try and take me out for what I did to it. I mean, it was just, I'm really, really proud of those 4 matches. But the first Shawn match was probably the best match I think I've ever had.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say the first Shawn match was probably a little bit better, but the second one was the more emotional one.
Oh yeah,
that was like from if you're working in all the stuff that makes professional wrestling what it is, the second match is probably brings the most elements to it.
That's what I try to tell people all the time, and I talk to young wrestlers. What we do is athletic storytelling, and that's the key to getting people hooked, and that's kind of the disconnect with our product now, is everybody thinks it's all about the athleticism and the things that they do in the ring, but it's the storytelling that gets people hooked. And and these are really organic moments that happen, like the handshake into the hug with Shawn after he had just lost in his career, he lost his career, and then at the end of the Hell in a Cell against Triple H, where Shawn was the referee, when we went up to the top of the stage, all three of us walked out of there together. That wasn't planned. That was all organic stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, you know what, this is probably going to be the last chance for this era to be, you know, doing it together. And it was just, you know, it was just something that happened. And, you know, I have a poster of that, of the three of us standing up there. It's above the door to my gym here at the house, and I see it all the time. And I just, you know, I can't help but look at it and feel proud that, because like I said, those were, you know, those 4 matches were just, I thought, in my opinion, like they were storytelling at its best. And it's hard to do in this day and age to take something for 4 years, as much content and as much exposure as we get to be able to do that. It's, I'm really proud of those.
You know, you might have a different answer for this, but I thought Shawn was the guy that meshed with you the best, because you guys were so different, and the things you were good at, the things he were good at, and he was good at. And, you know, the best quality he had was he's on the short list of being able to sell the other guy and punishment. And you were on the short list of guys who just seemed the most physically imposing, who could dish out the most punishment. And I thought it was a perfect match. It was interesting to hear you in the documentary series in 2017 or 18, and you're talking about AJ Styles, and you're saying, man, I'd love to work with that guy. It was kind of very Shawn-esque, but then you finally end up doing the WrestleMania match with him this year, and it was a little reminiscent of it, right? It was like almost like having Shawn back.
Yeah, it really was. And that, I think that was, it was funny. It's funny how the cameras caught all this stuff. Once again, there was no plans for any kind of AJ Styles match or angle or anything. That was just the cameras catching me talking about whatever I was talking about, and he was on the monitor. And that just came to like, man, I wish I'd, you know, because at that point, even then, I was like, man, I don't know if I had enough. I didn't know if I had enough gas in the tank left to really make that match work. So I wasn't even thinking about it. It wasn't on the radar. And that was just an honest, like, man, I would love to have worked with him, because I think, you know, he's probably the best out there today. AJ is, you know.
Right.
And then, lo and behold, it comes around. And then, but yes, to answer your question, AJ is probably the closest to Shawn that I you know, that there's been. You know, he's undersized, but he has that ability. There's only been a few people like Shawn and Eddie Guerrero, AJ. You don't see like the size disparity, because that's how good they are.
Right.
You know, and they understand, okay, I'm working with this giant dude, you know, I'm going to get thrown around. I'm going to get hammered, but I'm going to get my spots in here, and I'm going to take advantage of them the best I can. They understood that. And, you know, that's why they're so good, and that's why they can work with anybody. And I've always preferred, like, I think my best matches, guys like Bret Hart, and Kurt Angle, and Eddie Guerrero, and Shawn, you know, my best matches were smaller guys.
Right.
That got it, that understood, and, you know, when you work, you know, 2 big guys, like, you know, it's a slugfest, and you do the same kind of things. And it's like you said, like Shawn did, you know, he had his style and my style, and they just happened to mesh really, really well. And,
were you ever worried about with those smaller guys actually like legitimately hurting them? Because, you know, you're throwing them around like a rag doll. Like how do you make sure it doesn't go too far?
Well, I mean, you know, I don't think wrestlers get enough credit for how actually physically, you know, how physically tough you have to be. You know, everybody has their ideas and their preconceived ideas about what professional wrestling, sports entertainment is. And, you know, you can get people into an argument quicker than anything. Like, you know, put an MMA fan against, you know, a professional wrestling fan. It's all crap. It's all this and all that. You know, and when I was young, that used to bother me. You know, as I've gotten older, I was like, man, I got 20 surgeries that says, you know, this isn't, you know, this isn't, you know, this isn't easy stuff. But yeah, you know, I was physical with them, but it's just being professional and being safe, you know. I mean, and wrestling, and what a lot of people really don't understand, you're always just 1 or 2 inches away from something being really catastrophic.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
and it's happened.
It's happened. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then when you think about these guys, you know, they're out on the road 300 dates a year now. So you start equating all that, all those bumps and all the you know, and then back in the day, you worked all the time, whether you're hurt, you weren't hurt. You know, you're trying to protect something that's hurt, and that's how you end up getting hurt even worse, you know. But I never, you know, I was always, I mean, you took some abuse with me, but, you know, I was safe. I wouldn't, you know, I didn't throw somebody down so that they were going to land on their neck or they were going to land awkward. They were going to land hard, but they were going to land flat and they were going to land safe. So, I mean, I kind of prided myself on being, you know, as safe as I could, as violent as I was. So,
you know, one of the greatest athletic things I've ever seen was in the late 90s when WrestleMania was in Boston. And Sean had that match where Mike Tyson was the guest referee.
Oh, yeah.
But his back was all fucked up. But he wrestled anyway. And then and he got through it and the match ended. And then Triple H literally had to like carry him backstage. Like he couldn't walk. And this was after the lights had gone out. It was the last match. And they weren't doing it for the fans. The thing was over. And we were kind of staying watching it because I was there. And it was like, oh, he's really hurt. Like he couldn't even get backstage. And then we didn't see him again for, I don't even remember when he came back, but it was definitely a while after. Probably, but you just, none of us had any idea until he left the ring. It was like, oh my God, how much pain was that dude in?
Yeah. But he went into that with a serious back. I think it was a disc, something he had going on. But you know, so that's go ahead.
When you show up in WWE in 1990, and Ric Flair is there at some point in the early 90s, but he's at a different phase of his career at this point.
Right.
But still, he's the other guy people mention when they talk about the great workers who could sell everybody. When you worked with him, what stage of his career was he in at that point?
Well, that's a really, so I worked with him a little bit when I was in WCW, not much, just some house show stuff. And then his first time in to WWE, well, it was still WWF back then. I got to work a few house shows with him, but it wasn't really, I got the year that I worked at WrestleMania against Rick, you know, Vince came up to me when it was getting late, and I didn't have an opponent. And Vince was like, I'm really sorry. You know, I just, you know, we got this going on and that going on. And I completely, you know, I'm going to say he forgot about me, but I was down on the depth chart at the time, and he felt bad. So he gave me the option of 2 guys. He said, these are, you know, you can work with this guy or you can work with Rick. And I said, I'm going to work with Ric Flair. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And Vince looked at me, you know, he was like, really? He was shocked that I didn't want to work with the younger guy. I was like, this is a no-brainer. I want to work with Flair, you know? So Flair was just coming back after being in WCW and getting treated, you know, they just really misused and mistreated him down there. And so, you know, it was, you know, he thanked me. He thanked me after the WrestleMania match he says, you've restored my confidence in myself.
Wow.
It was like, you know, it took me a while to figure it out what he meant, but I was shocked, like, cause you know, I'm like you, I'm like, dude, you're Ric Flair.
Right. You're an all-timer.
You're the GOAT, brother. You are, that was before everybody was the GOAT. He was the GOAT, right? And I was just blown away that, that his confidence was so low. And, he talks about it a little bit in his documentary. But it was such an honor for me to be in the ring, especially in WrestleMania against Nature Boy. But, I was like a kid in a candy store.
Right. What kind of athlete were you in high school? You had to have been a good athlete.
I was a basketball player, and I had some pretty good hops. I could get up a little bit.
Were you like a power forward? Where were you like were you a post up guy? What were you?
My true position would have been a 4, but I ended up having to play in the post most of the time because even back then I was bigger. I wasn't big like I was when I got into wrestling, but for a basketball player, in the early 80s, I was 200 pounds, and especially in high school, that was pretty big back then.
Yeah.
And then, when I played in college, I got up to about 235, 240. And, I looked like, I was like Karl Malone, I guess, how big he was. But it's funny, like I'll see pictures of, back then, and I'm like, man, I look like a giant walking stick. Yeah, I was so used to being now, over 300 pounds for all these years. It's like, people just call me big, but
no football for you?
No, I was that kid. Like, I think I would have probably had better scholarship offers if I'd have kept playing football.
Tight end.
Yeah, but I was just like, everybody said, you got to go play football, and I'm the kid that goes, okay, I'm going to play basketball.
Right. You swerved the other way.
Kind of marched to my, the beat of my own drum. So I love football. But
I remember when you showed up in WWE, and it's funny because God, it was 30 years ago, but when you were doing some of the stuff at your size, it just hadn't happened before. The big guys from the 80s were the Hogan types. It was like clothesline, leg drop, stuff like that.
Right.
And you're walking along the ring ropes, and it was like, what is happening? Where did this guy come from? Because I didn't follow WCW at that point. You'd only been there for a couple years anyway. Right. You showed up, and it was like an immediate impact.
Yeah, that was when when I got into the business, and I looked at the product. I was like, and I had the same takeaway as you did. Like, all the big guys, they don't do a whole lot. So, I said, okay, well, I'm pretty athletic. So, and I was fortunate enough to work with Don Jardine a lot when I first broke in the business. John Jardine was the spoiler, wore a mask, but he was the first one that I'd ever seen do the, it's called old school now, but, he would take a guy and walk the ropes. I was just blown away by it. Jardine was about 6'5". Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, as soon as he's gone from the business, as soon as he retires, I said, that's mine, and so that, I just like, okay, I'm going to do things that people aren't used to seeing guys my size do. And it took me a while once I got to WWE, because I had to pull in the reins a little bit, because it didn't necessarily work doing that stuff all the time as the Undertaker. Right. So when I'd work, I would work really, really slow, and and I would stalk, and I would, and then all of a sudden, bang, I would do something and hit a big flying clothesline or do something roll, and people would be like, what just happened there? So it took me a while to figure out how to put all that stuff in and still and let the character, do what it was supposed to do. So
did you create the character, or did you co-create it with Vince, or how did that work when you got to WWE?
So it was Vince's creation, and he had it, and I guess he had it for a while. He just never had the right guy, and obviously he was waiting for a big guy with no personality to come along, and so yeah, so he gave it to me, and he called me, brought me up to Stanford, showed me the the storyboards of what his brainchild was there, and I was like, okay, we'll see. And then I just kind of started studying, like, okay, what is this guy? What is this Undertaker? So, I start studying like Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger and
Right.
Jason Voorhees, and then trying to figure out. And then, man, I picked Jake the Snake's brain all the time. I mean, he's
Wow.
so wrestling his intelligence for a business was just second to none, especially with dark characters.
Yeah.
I mean, so really got a lot of really nice insight from Jake, and then as it kind of progressed, and Vince knew that he could trust me, then I would come to him and say, look, I want to do this with a character. I think I need to move in this direction, and fortunately, our working relationship, it was what it was, and he let me kind of tweak and change the character as I felt like it needed to be.
When did you feel, what was the moment that you remember when you said, like, what match was it when you were like, oh, this is happening. This is gonna be my thing. I see the roadmap now to real success here.
Yeah, that was probably it's probably one of the first guys that I got to work with, or my big angle was with the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
And yeah, at that time, Warrior and Hogan were kind of, they were kind of on the same plane as far as who the top draw was. And back then we would run two different towns a night, sometimes even three. And so Warrior and I would headline one of the towns, and then Hogan and whoever he was working would headline another town somewhere else. And I think I knew I had kind of arrived. We did a segment, and it was Paul Bearer's funeral parlor, and he was interviewing Warrior, and I come out of a casket, a stand-up coffin, lock Warrior into the I lock him in the casket, beat the casket all up, and just from the reactions, everybody, I said, okay, yeah, we're here.
I'm in.
Yeah, this is strong. Just you can just tell by the reactions of the people, like, okay, we got him, and we were off and running.
And you were like, I will be this guy for the next 30 years. I can feel it in my bones.
that there was no way that I could have ever imagined that kind of longevity.
So you're taking off with WWE. I was WWF, then became WWE,
Right.
but during a really weird time for the company, where it's kind of the post. You have the 80s, you have the height of Hogan,
right?
The Friday Night Main Event, all this great stuff, and then it hits the early 90s and things start flipping. And we get to the 95, 96 range. All of a sudden, WCW is poaching guys, and they have all the momentum. And the guys are fleeing to WCW left and right, and you were the one guy who stayed.
Right.
At that point, it sounds like from everything I've ever read, you were like the leader behind the scenes. You were like the guy every who WWE, WCW, whoever. There's always that one guy who's kind of running the locker room. When did you become that guy? What year? And when was it?
I guess it was somewhere in that era. Probably a little before. When we were getting our butts kicked. I mean, ratings wise, everything, we were just getting hammered. And, it's just like the guys that stayed or the guys that were still there, we just like, what, we're going to dig ourselves out of this. And, it's going to, I always knew it would, we would come back out on top, but
yeah,
it was just going to be how long it took and, how bad it was going to have to get before big changes were made. But that was something else. I mean, it just kind of happened. And it was like the way I looked at things, And people ask me, why didn't you jump ship when you could have? And it's like, well, one, those guys down there told me before I went to WWE, WWF at the time, they said, I went in to renegotiate a contract, right? I'd been there about a year and my contract was coming due. So I go in and meet with Jim Hurd, who was running at WCW at the time, Ole Anderson, Jim Barnett. And I'm looking for just a little bit of a bump, just a little bump in pay. I'm still relatively, green. I've only been around for a few years. And so I'm just looking for I'm just looking for a little extra cheese, right?
Yeah.
And they go, no, I don't think so. I said, we're going to re-sign you at your current deal. And they go, look, no one's ever going to pay money to see you wrestle. You're a good athlete. You're a really good athlete, but nobody's going to ever pay money to see you wrestle. Like, okay.
Okay.
That stung a little bit. And then,
so you're never going back after that?
Yeah. Once I left, and all Vince ever does, and he gives you an opportunity. He doesn't promise you like, man, I'm going to make you this, I'm going to make you that. He says, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do something. And that's what he did with me. He gave me an opportunity to be a success in this industry. And I was like, hey, he believed in me. He gave me the opportunity. That's all I needed.
So when did you become the leader? When did you become the leader of the locker room then? Because I'm always fascinated about that dynamics, because it's basically like an NBA team or an NFL team or a baseball team. You've dozens of wrestlers. You might have 50 wrestlers in an event. You might even have more than that. But somebody's kind of has to be the alpha dog if somebody's fucking up in the ring, if somebody's putting somebody in harm's way, if somebody's not following whatever the instructions of that day were. There needs to be somebody that kind of puts everybody in place. You became that person.
Yeah, I'd have to say probably around that 95, 96, that time period in there is when it really, I guess, became, it became a talking point. I mean, maybe I was doing it beforehand, but, it's just like, to me, and believe me, I had plenty of good times and I burned that midnight oil and everything else, but nothing came before business. I don't care how late you stayed out the night before, or what you did. At bell time is go time, and you don't come in and you're not going to be hungover, or you're not going to drag ass because you had a pretty good night the night before, and that's kind of how I think it started. And then it was just like, and then just kind of people would. They trusted me, I guess, because I had I had this connection with Vince. And normally when you're one of the talent is tight with somebody in the office,
right?
Well, they're a stooge, or they're okay, well, they're a snitch, or I never got that because everybody knew. I think I was able to. I could go and talk with Vince or whoever or whatever agent, or and then I could also talk to our talent and like give them my perspective and what I had seen what I've been through at that time, and I think they appreciated the fact that I didn't play one side against the other, but I was a pretty good spot to start, like when guys were. When they had issues or they didn't like the way they were being booked, or they didn't, they would bounce things off of me, or they'd want to know how to handle a certain situation. And, it just kind of grew from there. But I think everyone knew that if you and I were to have a conversation in the locker room, that's where it would stop,
Right.
And if somebody was doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or if they were getting in trouble, or, not paying bar tabs or not doing whatever that needed to, they knew as soon as I found out they were going to, they knew they were going to get it, So there was that trust factor and that, what I said is what I meant. And, I'm not going to go run off and say, oh, you're not going to believe what so-and-so's doing.
Well, it sounds like
I handled it internally most times. I handled things in the locker room before they ever got to, before they ever had to go to management.
Was the underlying theme of this, like, if we're going to settle this disagreement now, and if we don't settle it, we're going to really settle it right now? Like, was there a physical component to it?
No, it really never had to go that far, really.
Yeah. It was implied.
Like I said, I never presented myself, or I never as a bully. Now, I've got people's faces and let them, but normally I didn't try to, if I knew it might lead to something, aggressive like that, normally I take somebody away from the group.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
Back in the day, it was always like, you always knew something bad was going to happen if you got, like, if somebody said, hey, can I talk to you in the shower? You had to walk into the shower, like, looking over your shoulder, because you didn't know if you were going to get sucker punched or whatever. Right. So if there was somebody, a lot of times if there was a case where somebody really screwed up, I'd pull them aside, and then say, look, man, this ain't going to fly. You can't do this and all that. I mean, I wouldn't intentionally, on more serious issues, I wouldn't embarrass people in front of the rest of the guys. Now, there were certain times where that kind of worked. You kind of, as we call it, we kind of rib on the square, where, yeah, I'm kind of making this a joke, but if you look deep enough into me, that I'm trying to make light of this before it has to, before we got to make that trip to the shower, So,
so here's an example. So you have Michaels, who's been really honest about, I acted like an asshole in the mid 90s. Like, I definitely was a problem behind the scenes. He's talked about it. And him and Bret Hart, they're doing a whole, 7-8 month thing. They're not getting along.
Right.
And it's just getting more and more contentious. Is that a situation where you feel like you have to step in and, like, smooth it over, or grab the two of them and be like, let's all go to lunch?
No, see, at that time, so Bret had more tenure on me.
Yeah.
While he was there, at that time, especially. So there's certain guys, like, now I always got along with Bret, but Bret really more of a kind of a quiet leader, he took the business very seriously. And that's kind of the way he led. There was, that part there, I had to be,
you had to be careful,
because I didn't have the, I wasn't there long enough yet to say, hey man, you guys need to cut the shit,
Right.
I wouldn't mind breaking it up, but I was still, like I said, Bret was more tenured than I was. And, there's that whole respect level with me and the guys that come before me. But
what was your reaction when everything finally blew up, the famous match when Vince basically steals the title from Bret because he's leaving, and that turns into a whole thing, which basically is the best thing that ever happened to WWE in that decade?
Yeah, it was. I was pissed. I was pissed about the whole thing, because I felt like I possibly could have been used to get what we needed.
Yeah.
Like, take Sean out of this, let me do it, and then I'll do business on the other side.
Right.
And I think Bret probably would have went for that. I mean, there was such disdain at that time between the two of them. And, and Bret, was going, Bret was leaving. But I was just kind of, at that point, I was like, if you'd have just kind of come to me with this too, and it's his company, and, he did what he thought was best. But I was like, dude, I think I could have helped this whole thing out.
Right.
Because,
I'm right here.
I'm right here. And, I'm going to do business, and, but it happened. And I was really pissed. Like, the next day, you know, I don't know, we were supposed to show up by noon for a TV day. And I don't know, I think I rolled in about 5 the next day because I didn't know, like, I was so pissed about the whole thing and the way it went down. Like, I had to really gather myself because that was, you know, my intention. Like, when I got there, I was like, I'm going off on somebody about this, you know? And,
well, you love Vince too. I mean, Vince had done right by you and you're probably disappointed in him, right?
Yeah, I'm disappointed. Yeah, I'm really disappointed in the whole situation. And I don't want to put myself, like, I was so angry. Like, I don't want to go in there and start, you know, I mean, believe me, Vince and I have had our disagreements and, you know, but it was more, the issues were more centered around, you know, what I had going on and not what somebody else was doing. You know what I mean? But I also always look at the big picture before I look at my own thing. I look at the big picture of, you know, it's what's the cliche, what's best for business, right? So, but I was like, oh man, if I go, I'm going in there raising hell, and I'm not sure that, you know, I want to do that. So it took me all day long to finally figure out, okay, you got to calm down and you got to hear his side of it. You know,
well, it turns out. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, at that point, I'd already talked with Brett, and, you know, everything had already happened. You know, the fight, everything else, all that had already happened, and so
yeah, Brett punched him.
Yeah. So I had to figure out, okay, well, I need to hear Vince's side of this, and then give my perspective, and then at least, you know, say, look, if this kind of shit happens again, you know, you got to involve me here because, you know, it doesn't have to go down like this.
Right.
And, you know, and he agreed, and, you know, it all, I guess, you know, it all worked out. It was sad, you know, because I'm really tight with Brett, you know, Brett could have done some things differently. Sean could have done things differently. Vince could have done things differently. It could have been, but then, just like you said, I mean, that's one of the great wrestling stories of that era and that decade. The Montreal screw job, you know?
It's one of the way it worked out was one of the great outcomes in the history of the business. Cause not only you established Vince as now this villain where now it's crossing over real life into storylines and things like that. But also Brett leaving was good for the WWE because, you know, they had a lot of talent back then. It opened the door for some people to get bigger shine too, which sometimes, you know, in sports and in wrestling, sometimes it's good when somebody leaves, you know, sometimes you have the talent that can step in.
Yeah. You know, but you know, there again, on that, I mean, that issue, and I agree with you to a certain degree, but, you know, there's also that point where, you know, when we came up, it's just like, hey, those are the guys on top. Those are the guys you're shooting for.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's okay. These are the guys that are making the money. If you want to make the money, then that's why the Attitude Era was so just awesome. I mean, you're talking about stacked. I mean, that roster was just stacked. And of course, you know, Steve was at the top. And you had Rock there, you had Triple H there, you had Mick Foley there, you had Undertaker, Kane, just, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it was just like everybody was scratching and clawing to try to be, you know, to get that top spot or be in that top spot with Steve, you know.
It's almost like the NBA, because I was thinking about that watching the Michael Jordan doc. When he wins his first 3 titles in the early 90s, the league's just stacked. There's just Hall of Famers everywhere. And I look at that late 90s thing where, you know, wrestling kind of ebbs and flows depending on who the best 7 or 8 guys are at a given time. And in that time, it's just Hall of Famers all over the place. And then you have The Rock on the way up, who's probably, I would say, all things considered, mic skills, just everything, probably the most naturally talented wrestler we have. Would you agree with that?
Rock obviously was a tremendous athlete, you know, had the look, but I mean, Rock's deal was his mic skills. I mean, that's what set him apart from everybody. He was just so entertaining, you know, and
I've never seen anything like it, because when he was on the rise, you're like, this guy's going to be like an actor. Like he was the one guy I've ever seen in wrestling where it's like, he's clearly leaving at some point and going to make movies. Cause
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He probably made the right decision to leave. Yeah. You could just tell though with him, I think he got like one of the first little bit roles that he got, you know, it was only a matter of time. He just had too much personality and too much charisma. You know, and then I think that, you know, he had that desire to go do that. Obviously he had the desire to do it. I mean, he did.
Well, and then you had one of your most famous matches during that stretch too, when you almost killed Mick Foley. That's still the craziest bump I've ever seen in my life.
The one off or the one through?
What was the one where his tooth went through his nose?
See, so that was the one where I choke slammed him through the top of the cell.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, so that cell wasn't supposed to break like that.
Right.
So it was only supposed to give way.
I don't think people know that. I don't think people know.
Some do, some don't. But as we were up there on the top walking around, now, like, I'd already had that match once with Sean, but Sean, you know, was half of what Mick weighs, and, you know, half of what, you know, and I'm, like I said at the time, I'm 315, 320, and Mick's probably, I don't know, probably 280. And we're walking around on those chain link panels, and you can hear the wire that has them fastened to the pole, and you can hear them, ting, they're just shooting off, right? And as you step, you can just like, whoa! I don't.
Oh my God!
I don't remember that from the first time I was up here with Sean, right? And I swear, I'm just really fortunate. Right before I choke slam him, like I step off of the panel and step onto the poles. If I hadn't,
you go with him.
We could have had a really, really far worse outcome, and it was pretty bad as it was. But yes, so he landed, his incisor went through his lip and then lodged in his nose, right?
He loved it. He's the happiest anyone ever would have been with that outcome.
Well, yeah, right?
He's like laughing.
So, you know, he is like, you know, I mean, he's in Lululand at this point, right after that bump, right? And I can tell, I'm looking in his eyes, and it looks like a slot machine. I mean, his eyes are going. I'm like, and I'm hitting him, and I'm telling him like, Mick, yeah, let's go home, man. You're and he's like, just give me a second. But like, sometimes you just get distracted by the weirdest things, and like, there's this what I thought was just a giant booger in his nose, right? And I'm like, oh, it's just disgusting. And then finally, you know, he realizes it's his tooth.
Oh my God.
He takes the tooth and hands it to the ref.
Unbelievable.
Like, only in wrestling, man. He just took his tooth out of his nose, and but yeah, man, it put a hole right through his lip, and that's where it stopped.
You know,
but then,
I mean, it's a famous moment. Everybody's seen it. I'm sure it's been viewed a cajillion times on YouTube. I think the part people don't fully understand, unless you've actually been to one of these events and been like on the ground floor, is how high that cage is. Because on TV, it's like, oh, that seems high. But when you're actually like, because I remember a couple years ago, Shane McMahon did that flying elbow jump off the top of the cage, and it was right in front of us. And I actually thought he was going to die in midair. Like it's 5 feet further than you think it is.
Oh,
and you're watching, you're like, oh my God, you almost think the guy's going to do like a 360. It's so far.
It's there's way too much margin in my book. There's way too much margin of error for that.
Yeah.
You know, Shane felt like I was in that match too. So
yeah,
you know, there's a recurring theme here, but like, I was like, I didn't want any part of it. And that cage is 5 foot taller than the one that I threw Mick off of.
Yeah. So,
I mean, that thing is just, I mean, he looked like a little ant when I was laying there at the table looking up at him. I mean, he didn't look that big. That's just because how far away he was. And then that's a really small, hard landing area to hit that desk, you know.
Well, that's the other thing I think about with 98 to 03, basically. The bumps just started, and ECW had something to do with this too, I think, because they're pushing the envelope. It becomes every show has to kind of outdo the last one.
Right.
15 feet isn't high enough anymore. Let's do 17 feet. Let's try to get 20. And on top of it, that's when the steel chairs in the head and nobody's realizing like that could be potentially dangerous too. The amount of punishment just in that 4-year span that everybody has taken is like bonkers to look back at. And
oh yeah, I look back at some of that stuff and just think, my goodness, you know, it's amazing that there weren't more really, really serious injuries. And some of that stuff that they were doing at ECW were just, I mean, it was completely off the chain.
Right.
You know,
dangerous.
At least with our group, I mean, we had a stunt guy there. And it doesn't change the fact that it's a super dangerous thing, but at least you have somebody there that tells you the practicality of what might happen. And, you know, like, you might not want to do it that way. You might want to, you know, there, I think it was just like, hey, it's a free for all. And it's really amazing that we didn't get more guys really seriously injured during that time period.
That was also right around that time you switched gimmicks a little bit.
Right.
And you became the American Badass. You basically retired the Undertaker for a couple of years.
For basically, I mean, I kept a little bit of it, a few elements, but for the most part, I don't think I would have been able to survive the Attitude Era in that mainstream Undertaker character at the time.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you look back at that stuff, I mean, there were the shackles were off, man. I mean, it was there was nothing. The interviews, I mean, they were cutting edge, and they were real, and it would have been tough for me to stay so locked into that. You know, as great as the gimmick is, there's a lot of confines to the gimmick. There's a lot of things that I can do and I can't do. And, you know, when you got somebody like Stone Cold out there cutting promos and Rock calling everything, you know, Mickey Mouse, and, you know, they would have ate me alive.
Right.
You know, I mean,
well, the American Badass, it tied into your real personality way more. It was like, oh, wow, look at this.
I mean, you know, all the bikes, and I've rode motorcycles all my life. So yeah, it was Mark Calaway pumped up, you know, a few notches.
Yeah.
And it was fun because it was it just let me loose for a little while. You know, it let me cut promos, and it let me talk shit, and it let me do things that I hadn't been able to do. And then what it allowed me to do is to go back to the character and make that character fresh all over again. But you know, even when I went back to the Undertaker, I retained like some of the style that I worked. I kind of kept some of the American Badass style, and you know, I kind of kept, you know, interweaving the two characters as we've moved along through all these years.
So we head into the mid 2000s, and you're one of the guys carrying the company in the NBA. Like, I look at Michael Jordan, it's like, what was his peak year? 92, probably. Athletically, he's the best, but 97, 98, he's figured out more of the mental game. If you look back, what was your peak year? What was the year where you had the athleticism combined with a complete understanding of what was going on?
I would say probably, I don't know that I could just like say one peak year, but I'd say pretty much from, as far as the understanding of the business and feeling like there was nothing that came up that I couldn't handle. I'd probably say 2003 to 2008.
That makes sense.
I felt like, I mean, I had a pretty good grip on, you know, I could go out without, you know, having any kind of knowledge about the other guy and have a match that, you know, people would be, you know, like, whoa, that, you know, that was good. stuff. And I was still, I could still move, I could still move really well at that time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so hard now. Like when I go back and watch, I grade myself on those years, right? Like, wow, man, you could move. And,
Right.
then I got to watch these stuff like, the WrestleMania with Roman. And I was like, whoa, what the hell happened there? And I don't give myself the benefit of like grading on the curve. It's just like, okay, that's what I should be doing. And, and this is what I'm actually doing. But
how aware were you of just the mortality of a wrestling career? Because when you came up, think about the guys that were there in 1990, like Hogan's there, Ric Flair, Ultimate Warrior, those guys come and go. Then you have the Bret Hart, Stone Cold, all those guys come and go. You're still there. When do you start looking internally and going, oh shit, I might be nearing that point too that I saw with all these other guys?
Yeah, that was probably probably in the middle of the Shawn and Triple H matches there. I felt pretty good. For the Shawn match, the first one. I felt, I kind of could sense that I wasn't moving exactly the same way that I used to, but I could still get it, done. And, but it was really, I think it was, so after the first Triple H match, not the one in Houston, but out of that four series with Shawn, and that's when I had my first hip fixed. And, I was like, okay. And that kind of gave me a little bit of life. But then, because when you get things going on like that with your hips, and your gait gets off, everything.
It's like structural. You're like a building. It's like knocking out like a floor of a building, and now you're like off out of whack.
Yeah, you're out of whack. So you get that one side fixed, and then it didn't take long for the other side to, you have to kind of relearn how to walk. And it's really been since that first hip shot, it's really been a struggle, to try and keep yourself not only healthy, but, at a level to perform.
20 surgeries for you?
Closing in probably. Yeah, I'm probably close to 20.
So both hips.
So yeah, so I don't
knee?
have. I've had scopes. I need to do something with my right knee now. That's like my number one issue now is my right knee. So my hips, and the only reason I got to continue working was that I did a thing called the Birmingham hip resurface. I did it in New York. So, well, obviously, if you saw Dr. Sue did that. And what
it was graphic.
If you know anything about hip surgeries or hip replacements, normally they come in there, they cut the femur off, and then they put that big, huge metal prosthesis in there.
Yeah.
Well, if I'd have had that, then my career would have pretty much been over. And that's what I thought that it was going to happen I thought that was going to happen in about 2011. I just couldn't. By 2011, like if I'm standing up and on my feet for most of the day, by the end of the day, I couldn't stand anymore. I just had searing pain down my leg. So I go and see my main orthopedic surgeon is Dr. Bird. He's the team physician for the Tennessee Titans. And I said, all right, Dr. Bird, I think, I think, it's time. I can't do this anymore. And he goes, Mark, it was time 5 years ago. He says, I don't know how you've lasted on what you got this long. And I was like, okay, so I'd come to grips with my mortality and so I went home. Like I said, he's in Nashville. So I come home and I was like, all right, well, the career's over. I don't need this hair anymore. So I shaved my hair off. And the day after I shaved my hair off, he calls me and he goes, hey, Mark, I just thought of something. There's this doctor in New York who's doing this thing called the Birmingham hip resurface. And he says, I think you might be a really good candidate for this surgery. At this time, they'd only been doing it. They've been doing the surgery for less than 10 years. And he goes, I think you'd be a good candidate. I think you ought to go see him. And he says, then you can make up your mind one way or another. So I go see Dr. Sue in New York, and he does a bone density test and everything. He said, "You're a great candidate." He goes, I said, "If this goes well, I plan on getting back in the ring." And he looked at me and he goes, "I will say this." He says, "That would be the biggest test that anybody has put on this, this surgery, this hip, And I said, "Well, that's where we're at." So I did the surgery and came home, rehabbed, and started training. And that was between the two Triple H matches that happened. I came back and everything worked out fine. But basically what they do is they take the head of the femur, they shave it all down to get all the arthritis off of it, all the spurs out of the joint. And then they put a titanium cap over the bone instead of cutting the bone off. They just put a cap over it. And then they go into the acetabulum and they hammer their same kind of titanium cup in there. And it's amazing. It's like taking a top, like I have one, I don't know if it's, the company sent me one. I wish I knew exactly where it was. I'd show it, but because it's just amazing. Like you can take the part that goes on the bone and you can put it in the cup and you can spin it. And it spins like a top. That's
wow.
It's amazing. I wish I could.
Well, we should mention that your pain tolerance is pretty legendary. Like even in that Foley match we were talking about, you had a broken foot, right?
Yeah, I went into that match with a broken foot, and
and you're jumping from the top of the cage down to the ring, which is
you can see
insane.
Me kind of you can see when I land that I kind of
Yeah.
But
I forgot I have a broken foot.
At that point, I was more concerned whether or not Mick was breathing or not
Jesus.
to worry about my foot. I've got a pretty high pain tolerance, and most times I think it's a blessing, but then there's other times you think maybe you're tougher than you are smart. And, it's kind of what we're dealing with now in this whole process is like,
right.
What are you doing to yourself looking, trying to get this match that you want to have and this ending that you want? What are you doing long-term? And
then also like the difference between 25 years, 30 years, 32 years, at some point, the incredible career is the incredible career. Like how long do you keep adding to it?
Exactly. And there's the chance too now at this point, like I always, I'm really cognizant of like, I don't want to do damage to what, the legacy that I have. Like, I don't want people, I was so sad about, Ali at the end,
Yeah.
Yeah. He had all those great fights, but he, cause he got screwed out of all of his money. He kept fighting. And then, there's just guys that were just hammering him that had no, I'm a huge boxing fan. Right. So,
yeah,
I mean, I as a
Me
kid,
too.
I almost cried watching Larry Holmes beat Muhammad Ali, and Holmes looking at the ref like, are you going to stop this or not? And
well, remember the Sports Illustrated cover after that, and it's just Ali sitting in his corner, just faces all swollen. And it's oh man, yeah, same thing. And it's funny with boxing, and I think MMA a little bit too. They always have to have like the 2 extra fights before they realize that they're actually done. Like they need to get the shit kicked out of them 2 extra times. And it's like, oh, I must be done.
Yeah.
Like really only Hagler is the only one who, out of all my favorites, is the only one who never had those 2 extra fights.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved Hagler, man. Gosh, dang. I love watching him fight. That fight with him and Hearns is the greatest 4 rounds ever.
They just showed it on ABC a couple weeks ago. I think it's the greatest 10 minutes of all time. Whatever it is, God, 11 minutes.
That was just awesome. It was like almost like it was scripted.
Right. You know what else is amazing? Hagler Leonard, which was such an iconic fight.
Right.
It's like a week. It might even. No, it's a week after Andre Hogan. It's one way or the other. Yeah, it's one weekend was Andre Hogan, and then the next weekend is Hagler Leonard.
Wow. Man.
crazy spring. Hey, before we go, I wanted to you have such a fascinating relationship with Vince McMahon.
Mhm.
I think it seems like, you know, a lot of people have a lot of complicated feelings about him. I personally have had a great relationship with him, but you seem to have the best relationship with him. Why?
Yeah.
Why is your relationship the best with him?
I don't know. I think, one, this business leads to a lot of between talent it used to be back in the day, we used to call him the booker, right? The booker, and so there's always been this this kind of contentiousness between the talent and the and the management. And I don't know. I think it's probably just the trust level and the fact that just through the years, like I never forget that he gave me that opportunity. That's, and a lot of people call me silly and naive because you should always go for the money, right? Well, that's not the way I'm wired. Whether it be good or it be bad, it happened to work out okay for me. But I think he always knew, no matter what, that he could trust me. And in turn, I could never say that there's been a time that that he's screwed me over. And so even like our relationship today, I mean, he's still my boss, obviously, but we hardly ever talk business anymore. There's usually somebody else that, like, if I have an issue with something, I deal with somebody else. And then, me and him, we talk more as, as friends, and unless something big comes up, or, if he wants me to work WrestleMania, then he'll usually, when nobody else will call me, he has to force himself to call me. But I think it's just the trust, and then just being through so much stuff together.
Yeah.
I was with him during the trial back in the day. Funny story about that. He had all that going on, right? Like he had the bodybuilding thing, and then the trial, and all of it's just really going to hell. So he was at the time like he's a big Redskins fan, right? Washington Redskins. I'm a big Dallas Cowboy fan, right? Even with all that going on, we made a bet, right? Because, Dallas plays Washington twice a year. Anyway, So we just made a casual bet over $100 who was going to win the game. As usual, Cowboys win. And he was in the middle of going back and forth in the trial. He sent somebody to TV. He wasn't going to be there. He sent somebody with $100 in pennies to pay me off. I mean, with his whole world potentially just caving in on him, I mean,
wow.
You could look at that man honestly, and everything could be just going completely to shit. And you ask him how his day is, it's fucking great. I mean, how can you not? That's just how he is. And, and I guess I have a lot of that, so I wear a few more emotions on my sleeve than he does. But I mean, we're very similar that way. Like with my pain tolerance, I can be in excruciating pain, and, I'll be able to sit here and have this conversation with you. I'm not going to, but we just have a lot of similarities in our personalities. And I think it's just years of trust and I don't know.
I didn't realize till I watched the documentary that, you guys had such a deep friendship that you get hurt in the Lesnar match and he leaves WrestleMania.
Yeah. I was like,
he literally goes to the hospital and takes off and just like, all right, you guys handle the rest of WrestleMania. I'm leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, evidently I told him I cut a promo on him, and I don't remember doing any of this, but I cut a promo on him. Like, don't you have a show or something to run? Why are you here? I don't remember any of it. It's what my wife told me happened. But yeah,
What do you
yeah, he
think?
left.
What do you think is the most misunderstood thing about him?
I think most people think he's like a just this tyrant, and you know, he really, and you only get to see it, I guess, if you're close to him. But I mean, he's just like for years, he's such a giving person. He really is. He's a really kind, giving person. And he knows how to run business, obviously, but he's just a genuinely caring and giving person. Like for years, he didn't. All the charities that we worked with, there was no publicity about any of it. You know, I mean, we worked with Make-A-Wish Foundation for years, and you never heard a word about it. He just because it wasn't. That's not what he was. That was not what he was about. It was from his heart. You know, and you know, it's like tribute to the troops. I mean, every year, whether it be Iraq or Afghanistan, he was on that plane with us. I mean, that's something you just. I don't think people realize what a big heart that he has, and how much he cares about the people around him. So,
Do you think he's one of those guys that he just keeps doing this until he dies? There's never I'm retiring. Like it's just this is it.
yeah, he loves it. He loves it. He loves that product, and he loves working out. Right? Those are his, and you know, and his grandkids and his family.
Yeah.
I mean, that he just loves it, and he's, you know, he's what's the
He's like 75.
He's 75.
Yeah.
And he's just like the Energizer Bunny, man. You know, his
It's
mom's
crazy.
99. His mom is 99 and was still playing tennis at 97.
Well, and his son is almost 50, jumping off 25-foot cages and
right,
elbow drops.
They got some crazy gene there that the rest of us don't have. But yeah, I hope no one's waiting on him to kick so that they can take over, because he's going to be there. He'll outlive me.
I forgot to ask you. This probably was important because we're in the middle of a pandemic and all. The wrestling industry right now, just trying to do shows and events with no fans. You had probably the most memorable match of WrestleMania, the Boneyard match.
Right.
But wrestling with no fans really made me realize, oh, turns out fans are really important with wrestling. Like entrance music, crowd noise. It's like, oh, shit, you just take for granted. And it's like, wow, this is weird.
It is bizarre.
I think it worked better for UFC because there were different things. You could hear the cornerman. It seems like it's still feeling its way with WWE how to do this. How do you think they've handled it so far?
I think they're making the best out of a really horrible situation. Obviously, you feed so much off of your audience, and you use their energy a lot to propel you through, you know, your promos and matches and things like that. And you can still see, you know, during the shows that sometimes you just they can't help it. You'll still see them look to the crowd, and it's just it's an empty warehouse. It is so bizarre. Like I did one to lead up to WrestleMania. I did one segment at the warehouse, and and I was trying to be animated and you know, and pissed off about something that AJ had said. And I'm storming around the ring, and I'm just thinking, I'm trying to draw on all the memories of like sold out crowds. And on one hand, I'm trying to draw those memories, but then I'm walking around and it's just like, there's nothing there other than the camera guy. You know, it is so bizarre. And it gives you perspective on how much that you do count on your fan base and the people being there. It's just because a lot of times if you're cutting a promo or something on somebody, you want to make eye contact with somebody, and you know, it's easier to make it really personal if you can, but with nobody there, it's strange.
Well, made me think that the crowd is actually the single most important wrestling character, because the wrestlers can change, but the noise, the ebb and flow, when the crowd turns on somebody, when they don't like a match. you gauge so much of your own reaction watching something from what the fans think.
Absolutely.
And to just remove that it's so surreal to watch. What is it? Just out of curiosity, what was the best crowd? You're talking 35 years of wrestling for you. What was the single best crowd?
Man, I tell you what,
because you've wrestled everywhere. I mean, even go back to the Astrodome and places like that, like
yeah,
arenas that aren't even in domes that don't even exist anymore.
Yeah. So that crowd in the Astrodome was pretty live. Of course, I'm from Houston originally, so that was pretty special. But that crowd in Dallas at Texas Stadium, man, that place was rocking too. 100,000 people.
Oh, WrestleMania?
Yeah.
Oh, I was there. Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah.
That was just an ocean of people. And, that was the largest crowd that I'd ever worked in front of. I tell you what, I used to love to work, when the card was sold out at the Garden, the Boston Garden and Madison Square, those places when they're full and the business is really thriving, and those places are just awesome to work because the fans, they come to have a good time. And I talk about it a little bit in the doc, like when you go to the Gardens, you got to bring it, right?
Right.
And if you bring it, they're going to love you, and they're going to show you that love and that appreciation, man. But you sneak it up, and you are going to hear it. So it's and then Madison Square is it was always cool. It was the first one that put all the big pictures of the people that had performed there on the walls, the line, the halls. They were the first one, I think, to do that. And where I dressed normally at the Garden, when I came out, right before I'd go to the area where we used to come out on the side, there's a big picture of Elvis. And then right next to Elvis was Ali, which I was a big Elvis fan and a big Ali fan, right? So those were like two of the last two things that I saw. Elvis at the Garden, Ali at the Garden against Frazier. And then boom, it was time to, turn into the Undertaker and go out. So, I mean, that was just like all those years that I worked there. That was kind of my routine right before I would go out. I would look at those pictures and then, go out. So
those MSG crowds, and some of the stuff's on YouTube now, like the Spectrum, MSG, Boston Garden, Chicago Stadium,
right.
Which WWE wasn't there that often, but all those kind of basketball arenas with the old setup before you had the suites.
Right.
And the fans are just losing their shit. Like you go back and you see the Bruno matches from the early 70s or, even some of Hogan's earlier stuff. But the Backlund stuff is where it really gets nuts because, he held the title for 5 years and he barely gets mentioned anymore, but was fighting all of these awesome villains from late 70s on. And the crowd is just losing their minds during it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh,
It's like life or death. It'll never be that way again. I don't know why it was like that in the late 70s, but it was just different.
The business was protected back then, I'm kind of the last of the guys that tried to protect the business.
Yeah.
But now, and I get it. I mean, it's things progress and it's the state of things, but back then there was less knowledge. Now there's so much, everybody knows everything. Everybody knows what's going on behind, what goes on behind the scenes. And, our fan base, they want to know what's going on in their personal lives. So everybody's on Instagram and Twitter and, there's so much that there's nothing, and back then, half the people still thought it was a shoot,
I would say it was more than half.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah, probably.
I would say it was like 90%.
And, and now we kind of go out of our way to make sure that people know that it's not, it just kind of took a little bit, I think, of the mystique and the feel of it. Now everybody, like I said, everybody knows everything and it's hard.
Well, I remember Dave Meltzer when he was writing for the National, the sports newspaper,
Uh-huh.
and he was writing about wrestling. And it was the first time somebody was writing about wrestling and reading and being like, wait, what the fuck? Wait, what? Wait, and there was this whole inner game, but it didn't really come out until the mid 90s when the internet starts and then the message boards.
Yeah.
And then you could feel wrestling trying to account for it, where you'd have these Monday Night Raws, but the fans knew somebody was going to show up that night because they'd read it on a message board,
Right.
and they're chanting for the wrestler who's not even introduced yet. And then the announcers have to pretend they have no idea this guy's going to come out, and you just feel it shift. And then they figured it out.
Yeah.
But
and,
it took a couple years.
I just remember being a fan as a kid. Like there was no internet. You know, you had to wait till that show came on, or if you went to the event live. Like I grew up in Houston, used to go to the Sam Houston Coliseum and watch it there. But that was all the content you got. So, you know, that, or, you know, and then if you wanted to know what was going on around the country, then you had to wait until one of the magazines came out, like, you know,
right.
Pro Wrestling Illustrated, or,
know,
to know what's going on in the Carolinas or Florida or, you know, or Minnesota. I just, you know, I get it, but I wish there was a little bit of that left. You know, I wish there was a little bit more mystique, but there's this, you know, we try to do things now, and I have this conversation with Vince all the time. I was like, how do they find out? Like, there has to be some kind of internal leak somewhere, because you can't do anything that surprises. I mean, it's virtually impossible anymore. So it only leads to be like, who lets this stuff out? Why is it?
Well, I thought about that during the Jordan doc. You know, part of what made him so great was there was a real mystique about him. We knew him, but we didn't really know him. You know, He was in commercials. Other than that, you know, he did press conferences, but there was still this mystery. Yeah. All right, what's this guy really like? But now you think of like LeBron, who's the best player now, and we know everything. He's on Instagram, he's producing different things, and he's just present and available. And you have a feel. I know his kids, Taco Tuesday. Right. And that's just kind of what life's like now in 2020. So I feel like wrestling representing that, and all the reality shows. I mean, 20, 30 wrestlers have their own reality show at some point at this. So you were kind of the last one. You were the last one who folded.
Yeah. And it's funny, right? So I guess I got a social media account. It's probably been less than 2 years, right? I finally just said, you know, I mean, you know, the writing was on the wall. I know I got more matches behind me than I do in front of me. And, you know, people are saying like, dude, you need to get yourself out there, because your wrestling career, you know, is coming to an end. Now it's time to cash in on the brand, you know, the stuff that you didn't do for all these years. You know, I was like, you know, and, you know, people are like, no, really, you need to do this and, you know, be prepared for post WWE. So finally I got a social media, right? I opened an Instagram account, and, so I don't know, I posted something. I think I posted something about, this is a couple of years ago. I posted something about the University of the Longhorns beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, right? Yeah. So the first kind of one of the first things that I did that was out of character. So I get, you know, so I'm scrolling through, looking at comments and stuff like that. And like, well, there goes my childhood. My childhood is ruined. The Undertaker is now on social media. He's a human being. Well, I had no idea. It's like, I'm looking at it like, you got to be shitting me. You got to be kidding me at this point. Like, you know, but people were like genuinely pissed that, you know, that I broke character finally after 30 years. Where do they find out you have a wife and kids? Oh my gosh. People hate her. People hate Michelle because she's married to me. Really? Oh my God. Are you kidding me? My fan base. She's ruined your character because you have a wife and children. Yeah. People they didn't want to see that. All they wanted was what I give them. Yeah. You know, I mean, they wanted more. Obviously they wanted more, but I mean, like my fan base has been very loyal, especially when you consider how long that I've been here. like my fan base has stayed with me, and then obviously they've had children now, and it's like, so I have, but they're very, and I'm very appreciative, but they're very possessive and protective of the Undertaker, and it's funny some of the stuff that you get.
I have to tell you one story before we go. So it's like 1998, 1999. I'm in Las Vegas, gambling at Treasure Island. Go on it's one of those. I'm broke at that point. Go on this run, and it's just one of those 2-hour blackjack runs where it's like, just you're getting every card. We're up. We're high fiving, ordering shots. Whole thing. It's like great Vegas night, ultimate Vegas night. Go to the bathroom, and I'm in there, and you walk in.
That's why I had that look on my face. I was
Vegas? I was gonna figure out. And you're like 2 urinals down from me, and I'm hammered. It's like 2 a.m, and you're there, and you're going to the bathroom, and there's just silence. And then I said something like, I'm up $500, and I'm taking a piss next to the Undertaker. What a night. And there's just 3 seconds of silence. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to kill me. And then you're like, sounds like it. And you walk away. And I'm thinking all these years later, how many dumb interactions with stupid idiots like me in 1997 have you had over the last 30 years where you just kind of have to move on?
Yeah, there's been a few. I mean, you got me really nervous when you start talking about Las Vegas. I think the statute of limitations has run out almost.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm good now. There's been a lot of weird things, and people that'll,
nobody tries to fuck with you, do they? Do the people like try to challenge you? No.
I've been very fortunate that way. Like, I'm kind of, until I get a read on somebody, like people I don't know, I'm a little reserved and not kind of standoffish a little bit until I kind of get a feel on where people are at 4 a.m. in Treasure Island's toilet. I'm and I'm probably about 10 sheets to the wind myself.
Yeah. So, I don't think you were sober either. Yeah.
Yeah. I was probably swaying, but no, I've always just kind of carried myself, not like in a, walk in, like, don't fuck with me kind of thing, but just carry myself in a way like, it probably wouldn't be, advantageous for you to fuck with me too much.
And you always keep moving, right? That's the move when you're super famous. Yeah. You never stop. You just keep going forward.
That's the worst is if you stop and then,
Yeah. Well, I have good news for you.
It comes to what's that?
I'm hiring you for a Ringer podcast. We'll talk about it later. I think you could do this. I think you can have your own podcast. You just have guests. Just shoot the shit with people.
Oh, you think?
It's easy. Yeah. You could do this. I'm telling you.
Oh, I might have to.
This could be your next thing.
It could be. I may be looking for a new job soon.
Think how many connections you have. You could just call in all the people who owe you something over the years. You could have every one of those people on as a guest, and that's 30 shows. You're good.
I'm going to put that to the think tank, man.
Yeah, put it on. I think you could have a podcast. Like, look, Stone Cold has reinvented himself a little bit. He's got a really good podcast. A lot of good people gone, but I think you could do it. I think, I don't know. I feel like you could do it. So think about it.
Well, I will think about it.
Put it under your hat.
People laugh at me because I've had up until recently, like I hate talking in front of people. As myself. Now I can talk as Undertaker. I can talk in front of 100,000 people and not blink an eye, but to be myself in a large group terrifies me. And I know I've got a little bit of a tick where I say, a lot. I don't know if you've noticed it, but
no, I didn't notice any ticks.
Well, I'm trying to really break the habit of not saying it, but it's like, I'll start talking about a story or something like that. And like, I'll be thinking about what I'm going to say. And then I'll say, anyway, people pick up on it. They kind of bury me.
Well, maybe your podcast can just be stories about things you did in Vegas that the statute of limitations have expired.
Some people, those never expire.
Are you a blackjack guy? What are you, like poker?
Yeah.
Blackjack?
I like blackjack. Yeah.
So you'd have to go to like the tables where you get your own little area?
Nah, man. I just get out there amongst the, people are
unbelievable. How did I not know this?
Yeah. I've been out to Vegas. It's been a while. It's been a couple of years since I've been out there, but I don't start till really late.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably why. Yeah. You keep it under the radar. Well, this was awesome. You could check out The Last Ride on WWE Network. There's been 2 episodes so far. I thought it was excellent. I really did. I really genuinely enjoyed it. It was great to talk to you. I'm glad we finally did this. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I'll consider doing my own.
Yeah, we got to talk. All right. Thank you.
See you, Bill.